Welcome to the 15-Minute Patriot Podcast. I am Ross the Dude Maher from Rhode Island, and I am joined with my colleagues, Dave the Wildman Wilder from southeastern Massachusetts, and David Sod from the free state of Florida. We know there are many outlets and sites for you to collect your news from, but here at the 15-Minute Patriot, we focus on what news should prompt you to do. We focus on action steps. Knowledge is important, of course, but citizenship requires action. So even if you will take just 15 minutes a month, you will be pleasantly surprised to see what it is that you can accomplish. We, the people, are at the top of the government, and it's time to get involved. Lastly, and always, we want to hear from you and about the things that you've done. So you can email us at 15minutepatriot@gmail.com. That's 15minutepatriot@gmail.com, or on Facebook at 15-Minute Patriot. Make sure you spell it out, 15-Minute Patriot. With that, I am in the lead. So today's topic is how political power influences the justice system. So, in doing some pre-show preparations, a couple things I wanted to leave you with, and that is, personally, I think that the word justice has somewhat been hijacked as of late. That people are looking for environmental justice or economic justice, housing justice, and every other kind of justice you can possibly think of. But the thing that I wanted to point out is that justice in and of itself, in terms of our justice system, is heavily reliant on decisions of politicians. Now, I'll give you an example. In 2025, this year, in Rhode Island, there is a proposition to make an amendment to the Rhode Island State Constitution in that jury nullification will be considered a proper trial defense argument. So, as of right now, it is not. And that is something that judges in general hold on to very, very tightly. So, that's one of the things that politicians are trying to influence to have more say over how the justice system operates.
So you use that phrase, jury nullification.
Yeah.
Jury nullification, yes.
Can you define that? That's weird.
So I indeed I had to look it up myself. So when I looked up jury nullification, it basically gave me a definition of when a jury returns a not guilty on during their deliberations. They come back with a not guilty, so the jury has nullified the charges. Now it goes a little bit farther than that. This is typically done when the jury feels that, yes, the person committed the crime, but they feel that the law itself is unjust or that it's being improperly applied. So right now, under Rhode Island law, jury nullification is not allowable as a defense in a criminal trial. That is something that the judges reserve a right to. And then the second thing that I wanted to bring up as my bigger example of, I think, much more blatant, obvious example of political power over the justice system is the arrest of Roger Stone. So at 66 years old, Roger Stone is a advisor of sorts to then President Donald Trump from his first administration. Ultimately, and I will just say this, as of right now, I am not a fan of the grand jury concept. I think it's somewhat of a one-sided application of law, but that's kind of another topic. So here's this 66-year-old man who is essentially being accused of a white-collar crime under a grand jury, or he's under grand jury indictment, let's say, use proper terms. So you have 29 agents from the FBI do an early morning. It's really not a raid. The proper term is executing a warrant. Okay, so they have a judicially approved warrant that they're executing. However, 29 heavily armed FBI agents executed did a tactical execution of an arrest warrant. For some bizarre reason, CNN, the news network, happened to be staking out the property when the FBI showed up, and they executed that warrant. So his lawyer said, this whole thing was really unnecessary, and if you just called me, I would have had my client reporting to you the following morning. And so you really say to yourself, it's definitely a huge over the top show of force for someone who is unlikely to mount a defense from their home. And I say this from the perspective of I've been there, I've seen FBI agents, Rhode Island State Police, task force officers execute warrants, search warrants at the homes of drug dealers. Like I've been there, I've seen it unfold. And to compare Roger Stone to that and the amount of force that was used, it completely, I would agree with his attorney, completely unnecessary. And really, I think it was done to make a show of what can happen to people who side with President Trump.
Yeah. So what did this warrant go down as, breaking down the door like we've seen in other cases where, a warrant has been issued and they just raid the place? And there's that famous story where the owner of the house was shot because there was no announcement. They just barged in and, bad things happened. So
no, they did announce, with like loudspeakers and stuff like that. So it wasn't considered what they would refer to as a no knock warrant.
Yeah.
They announced their presence, and I do believe that he answered the door in his pajamas. They were probably equally as flashy as the normal suits that he wears. He's known for being a sharp dresser, but that's how they arrested him. And I would have to say it's again, it's a white collar crime, and B, it's because who he was associated with, and that was President Trump.
Yeah. Yeah.
They used as harsh tactics when they raided Mar-a-Lago, based upon something that Trump had, that Biden had, that Obama had, Clinton had, and Pence had. But yet they chose Trump, raided his house in Mar-a-Lago, and even, did a set up everything, which was a lie, to take pictures of stuff that really they should have never done, exposing that, taking pictures of it as a setup. And then they even went through the personal drawers of Melania Trump, which they had no reason to do that.
Well,
and yet, go ahead.
So a couple of observations on the Mar-a-Lago raid. Again, had they simply contacted the Secret Service and said, hey, we have a judicially approved warrant to execute at Mar-a-Lago, that it probably would have unfolded a lot differently. In terms of that photo, to me, and I've actually laid out evidence to be photographed and done the photographing and uploading it into the records management system at the time. To me, that absolutely looked like it was a staged photo, right? They brought multiple pieces of evidence together into one, versus what they should have first done is taking a picture of where they found that particular piece of evidence. And I can tell you, because I've had friends who, and I believe it or not, the Food and Drug Administration actually has a subcomponent of federal pistol packing, badge carrying law enforcement officers. And they are very, very, very particular. The judges who ultimately hear these cases are very, very particular as to where evidence is found. And they have to go to great lengths to provide not only photographic evidence, but also sketches of what was found and where it was found in these houses that they conduct the warrants at.
That Mar-a-Lago is a little more complicated. Now, there's a report that I read, and I want to verify it, but it seems like the FBI came in with documents to add to what they found to make the evidence look even more egregious. So that is a criminal offense. That's a felony.
Absolutely, 100%. That's planting evidence.
That's planting evidence, and so I don't understand why our justice system doesn't pursue that and bring charges against it, against the people involved. Now we are seeing things like, the 51 intelligence officers that signed off on the Russian dossier against Trump. They had their
security clearances
clearance revoked, but why aren't charges being pressed against them? So
to that point, Wildman, 6 of those people, those intelligence officers, were working currently when they signed off on that for the CIA. Now, if you look at our laws in this country with the CIA, they're not allowed to work within the confines of the United States. Their work is to be done outside. We have a counter espionage group with the FBI that works within the United States. And here you had the FBI working for, I mean, not the FBI, those 6 of those 51 people had been working with the CIA at the time that they came up with that cockamamie story that that the laptop looked like Russian disinformation, which was BS. So you sit back and you wonder, when is somebody going to do a perp walk? I mean,
Yes.
people in this country have done a lot less and have been arrested and taken away in handcuffs, but they seem to, and then, I get a little bit sidetracked, but another thing that I found really puzzling when you get to the cases that took place in New York City, the case with the paying off Daniels there, the stripper, whatever her name was.
Stormy
and the
Daniels.
other case, yeah, Stormy Daniels, and the other case of with the banking that he over valued his property. Well, everybody overvalues their property, and then the bank comes in and says, "No, it's not worth that much money. This is what it's worth, and this is what we're going to give you the note on your loan on," and then you pay it off, and that's what he did. So that was interesting, the case in itself. But then you find that Colangelo, who was third in line in the U.S. AG's office, says, "You know what? I'm going to go work for the state of New York. I'm going to go work for Alvin Bragg's office or Letitia James' office." I mean, come on. And then how many times did those people go and meet at the White House? And they weren't meeting there to just have, tea and crumpets. They were there because they were planning a couple of lawsuits. And what's going to end up happening? I mean, that's the
And
frustration that I feel.
and I think that what you also see in at least some of these cases is that the judges who are supposed to be somewhat the guardrails, so to say, to keep a case honest, keep it on track. I think the judge Eileen Cannon, who was involved with the Mar-a-Lago incident, she did a pretty good job of trying to maintain her partiality and hold both government, prosecutor and defense to account. But the case in New York are examples of blatant political influence, whether it was Judge Merchan, whose daughter was a Democrat operative, or the other guy there, I can't think of his name, but he was
Engeron.
Egeron, right? And he's saying that his Mar-a-Lago property was only worth $18 million. It's on the corner of both the Gulf of Mexico and the Intercoastal Waterway.
The Gulf of
place,
the Gulf of what?
Gulf of America. Well, at the time, the legal documents of the day said Gulf of Mexico. But here you have a property that's, you got me good, you got me real good. I walked right into that. You got property that's located basically, whether it's intercoastal or it's the Gulf or it's the Atlantic, it doesn't matter. It's waterfront property in Florida. That's I can't remember the acreage, but it isn't small. And Sean Hannity would talk about it all the time. There was a vacant lot in the general area that was a fraction of the size and like tenfold the value. So it's just a blatant, example of the judge's political influence on a particular case.
Now, this is the topic, and we're closing up the segment here. But we want to get people involved. And when we're dealing with the justice system, it's a little bit more difficult to figure out what can we do as citizens to make our voice known. I don't know if you can, write emails to justices or, your local judge. Do you have any suggestions on what a citizen can do to let our ire be known to the people that are overseeing our justice system?
I always come back to, especially in these last couple of years, as we pursued the Convention of States matter, I've really bought into, number one, if you don't know who your state reps and senators are, I'm not talking about the congressional delegation of your state. I'm talking about the people who sit in your General Assembly, legislature, whatever you call it in your state. If you don't know who they are, That is step one. You got to figure that out. You can figure that out by going to the legislature's website. This isn't hard homework here. And then from that point, whatever topic it is, whether it's something to do like this jury nullification or there's just something that you're aware of, meet with these people. Well, first research your topic so you know what the heck you're talking about. But meet with these people, see where their heads are at on a particular issue. And I think you may end up finding that either they don't know a darn thing about the issue or they actually do know some things, and just have an honest, respectful conversation with them. And you let them know that you are a concerned voter that pays attention to things. And that's really kind of how you start. You got to know who to talk to, and you got to know what it is you want to talk about.
The other thing I thought of in the state house is usually the legislators have a judiciary committee,
Yes.
and you can find out who's on those committees, and it's pretty easy to track what they're listening to and what they're what issues are coming before them. And those people, you can write an email and let them know. But good segment, Ross. Good stuff in Rhode Island. Thank you for doing all that research. I just want to say, for those listening, let's get involved. Let's have our voice be heard. Do your due diligence. Find out who your reps are on the judiciary. Maybe you want to look at your state capital and see if there's a judiciary committee, and track those people down, and maybe send them a few words of wisdom when it comes time. So, and post what you did on the Facebook 15-Minute Patriot page. You can find that. Just search for 15-Minute Patriot. And again, you can contact us at 15minutepatriot@gmail.com. That's 15 Minute Patriot spelled out. And thanks for listening.